Hey class, Mr. Coster here. Welcome to Chapter 3, Section 1, entitled Colonial Diversity. In this section, we're going to be looking at the wide variety of people that came to America. Nearly all these people came from Europe. By 1700, the population in the colonies was 250,000. 60 years later, that population was 1.5 million. Most of these were European immigrants, and we've talked about a lot of the reasons why they came to America. Economic reasons, all kinds of land, and of course, the promises of freedom. But there were some areas that brought the most Europeans to America. First of all were the English. England here is identified by this pale green color on your map. All that pale green area are the English. You see, they are by far the most prominent group in the colonies. Going in every single region, they were well represented. And of course, it's their customs, their language, their style of government that really had the greatest lasting impact on the colonies. A lot of these are Puritans. A lot of them settled in the New England area. Another significant group were the Germans. Germans are represented here by the orange color. A lot of them right in this area here. Encouraged to settle in Pennsylvania by William Penn. Folks looking for religious freedom. A lot of Lutherans came to America for that reason. Another major group were the Scotch-Irish. This lime green color. If you notice, there's a lot of them in the southern areas. They mainly came in the 18th century. Then we had some other miscellaneous groups. We had a lot of Dutch people coming to New York, a lot of Swedes coming to Delaware, and a wide variety of them coming to different parts of the colonies. If you look at this map here of the world, you can kind of see some of those areas where they were coming from. All right, class, let me look at the map up here of where these groups came from who came to America. First of all, we have the English. They're to come over, they're to hit all over the East Coast, primarily New England, some of the aristocrats down in the South. Another major group are the Germans. The Germans are coming over here to William Penn's territory and are coming to Pennsylvania. Another major group are the Scotch and the Irish. They're coming down south a little ways. They're to end up in Georgia, South Carolina. A few other small groups. We have the Dutch. Where did the Dutch go? Of course to New York, right? It was first New Amsterdam, and then it becomes New York. Another group were the Swedes. The Swedes are going to Delaware. If you recall, it was New Sweden and became Delaware. And a real big group, unfortunately, were Africans, the slaves. They're starting here along the West Coast, and they're coming over here and then up into the Americas. The first black slaves will come to America, 1619, into Jamestown. See ya! So unfortunately, we have a wide number of Africans being enslaved. It starts off in 1619, very early in America's history, and they're coming to Jamestown initially. That's where America began. These Africans first came as what we call indentured servants. An indentured servant is someone who would work for a certain number of years before gaining their freedom. But after a while, that indenture changed into flat-out slavery, where they had no chance at ever gaining their freedom. They became property. A slave actually cost about 5 times as much as a, say, European indentured servant, but it was worth it because they were your property for life, and their children became your possession as well. About 10 million blacks from Africa are going to come to the New World, and about 500,000 of them are coming to the Americas. You can see from this map here the number of different places that they are going to besides America. A lot of them staying right here in this region, some being sent to different parts of South America. But of course, here's the United States getting 500,000 ourselves that will be used. By 1730, 30% of the population of Pennsylvania, for example, was black, and by 1760, 60% of South Carolina's population was black, and most of these were slaves. And the blacks were needed because of the agricultural economy in the South. They relied heavily on those cash crops, right? Tobacco, cotton, indigo, and rice, and they used them to work the fields. Plantation owners who owned large farms could farm thousands of acres, not by themselves, but with the Africans working for them, and that allowed them to make a lot more money. There were a lot of freedoms that were denied the blacks who came to America. Things like land ownership, occupation, religious choice, education, voting, holding office were some of the many rights denied the black community. Most of these slaves, while they were working 6 days a week and about 15 to 16 hours a day in the summer, 14 hours a day the rest of the year. It was a brutal life for these Africans who were brought to America and in bondage, owned by Americans. One of the great atrocities in American history is our reliance and use of slaves. And then one last region I want to talk about are the Appalachian Mountains. And the Appalachian Mountains, you can see here, is the smudge on this map here in front of you, right through here. It runs up and down the East Coast, and it provided a western barrier between the East and the West. We call this the frontier. Any land that has not been discovered or been settled is known as the frontier. And we had some special people living here. We called it the backcountry, and a lot of the folks lived there. We called them the riff-raff, kind of some of the lower people of society, I guess. Some of them were debtors, some of them were escaped convicts, some of them were wife deserters, and they went off to the frontier where they could kind of escape the rest of society and some of the judgment placed on them by the rest of society. But typically, as they moved west and they claimed this land for themselves, it caused a lot of controversy between them and the Native Americans who were already living there. A lot of clashes, but a fourth group, besides the New England, Middle, and Southern colonies, are the backcountry people. Travel back then? Well, I want to make note of the Great Wagon Road. The Great Wagon Road, you see it mentioned right here, runs from South Carolina all the way up to Philadelphia. At this time, it actually stopped in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it began in Salisbury. But it helped to transport people the 700 miles between North Carolina and Pennsylvania. And actually by 1776, it helped to push people into the frontier, some 250,000 of them in all, living in that part of the country. So you see from this section a wide range of folks coming to America, some of them by their own choice, the Europeans coming for greater freedom. But unfortunately, the ironic side is that we have Africans being brought to America where their freedoms that the Europeans are coming for, they are being denied those freedoms.